Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Bruin Dash, the UCLA football show on Dash Sports TV. My name is Sam Connon. I'll be one of your hosts today. Once again, joined by Jack Perez. Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sam. Halfway through this quarter, it's looking like we're doing all right. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. I mean, all the other conferences have started up, but now we're 5 days away from Pac-12 play, so we're definitely looking forward to it. So UCLA, only a couple more days to go until that Colorado game, but some of the big news from the past week. We had an LA Times story looking at the money spent on food for just the football team, upwards of $5 million, first among the public schools in the Pac-12 and the public schools where the information was released across the country. So we'll be breaking that down, our thoughts on that. And then looking ahead to Saturday's game, it could be a potential air raid pass attack for UCLA for the first time in a while due to the matchup, the circumstances. And then Jack and I are going to break down our thoughts on how we think it could go come Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. So if you have any thoughts on those, if you want to join in on the conversation, if you're watching with us live, then feel free to add those in the chat. We'll get around to as many as we can. Just feel free to participate and we'll make this a conversation. But starting off with that LA Times story about the food and the food budget at UCLA in the Wasserman Football Center. Jack, tell me, do you think that spending $5 million and more is warranted for this program right now?
No, in no way, shape, or form is over $5 million being spent on just the food good for this program. Now, the LA Times article breaks it down pretty well. They show that UCLA spends over $5 million, whereas all the other 9 public schools in the Pac-12, they don't have the USC or Stanford data because they're private schools, but all the other 9, the highest spender out of those is about 1.2, 1.3, 1.4 million. A lot of them are under 1 million. I don't understand how we're almost 5 times more than the next closest competitor, especially since, let's be honest, this team hasn't competed like it. We're 7-17 over the past 2 years. What has Chip Kelly been spending this money on? If you go on Twitter, you can see that they release some of their food plans for the days, and it's a ridiculous amount of food. And in the evening, they have steaks and chickens, and they got a dessert of the day. It's really unrealistic to be eating this much and be spending this much on a team that the results don't match up to it. Now, if we were at an Alabama or a Clemson level or an LSU, Ohio State, any of those teams, then it's a little bit more realistic. If that really gave us an edge and this was really what put us over the top, then it's whatever you want to do, Chip Kelly. But this is not only not a winning program yet, at least it hasn't been in the past couple of years, but it's also a program that has a major deficit. It was 19 million in the whole. UC Athletics was 19 million in the hole before this pandemic hit, and once they release those numbers, it's going to be a much worse situation. So I don't see how they can justify spending this much on food every single year. What are you thinking, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of one of the aspects of the modern economics of college football. I know UCLA is spending more than any of its opponents. We're not sure about Stanford and USC, obviously, but that it's just kind of stuff you have to deal with. It looks bad. The perception is bad because the team is losing and because the athletic department is in a $19 million deficit. But if you're spending $5 million on food and you're winning and you're making $10 million a year in profit, then all of a sudden it looks better. I understand that spending that much money contributes to that deficit. I do, but it's just kind of the what you have to deal with when you're running a high profile Power 5 college football program. The question for me is you look at Oregon spending almost $35 million a year or last year on a football program, Washington spending a little over 40, and UCLA spending 35 million. And UCLA is the only one of those 3 who spends over $1 million on food, that non-travel food expense. So it's not that they're spending a lot on food that worries me, but what are they not spending on that Oregon and Washington are spending on? And maybe would it be a better idea to reallocate some of those resources to whatever it is? It's not facilities, because UCLA has beautiful facilities. Maybe it's travel, recruiting, something like that. It's not the base number that is an issue to me, because you're going to have to recruit. You're going to have to sell these recruits on this wonderful food and this diet and the nutrition, all that. I understand. But I mean, you should kind of look at how your competitors are spending and model it off of that, especially when you're not succeeding on the recruiting trail or on the field.
Right. And I think this is also a big thing that will come up for new athletics director Martin Jarman. A lot of these numbers were from Dan Guerrero's time here. He probably gave Chip Kelly a lot of money to do whatever he wanted with the program because he expected a return to winning ways, and that hasn't shown up yet. Now, whether Jarman gives Chip Kelly a short leash this year, whether he gives him a couple years to try to establish himself still in Westwood, I think he's going to have to cut that back if the team doesn't start winning. But at the same time, even if we don't spend on the facilities like in Oregon, like a Washington, we can still compete with them. I mean, you see some of the other teams on that list, while they're not as successful as an Oregon or Washington, Utah doesn't spend that much, and they've been a pretty good team these past few years. It's really about allocating these resources smartly, and I don't know why they're giving Chip Kelly a blank check to do this, because it's not proven that it's working so far.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Chip Kelly and his time at Oregon and his time with the Eagles, and this is pretty much par for the course for him. I mean, the story goes through what he did with those teams and those programs, eliminating fast food and Taco Tuesday and all these diet regularities for these big football players who kind of just eat whatever they wanted, and he kind of came in and kind of put him under a microscope and established this nutrition, this base. And he's doing the same at UCLA. And I would assume that was part of the deal when he signed with UCLA. I mean, obviously he gets his salary, but in addition to the $23 million, he also gets his way when it comes to how he manages his roster off the field, how he feeds them, what their diet and nutrition is. And if that was what had to be done to get Chip Kelly to come, I understand why the athletic department signed off on it. At the time, it was a home run hire. It was a big name. Beat out Florida for it. You look like LSU, according to the article, only spends $381,000 a year on its food. So maybe a program like Florida wasn't willing to let Kelly write that check. And yeah, maybe it's because they're better run and more familiar with football coaching hires, and UCLA was just ready to write a blank check, like you said. But at the time, I can see why they did it. Everyone wanted Chip Kelly at that point, and if letting him spend a lot of money on food and improving his players' health was part of that deal, then it is what it is.
That's true. That's true. I mean, Chip Kelly was a great hire, in my opinion, at the time, but the results haven't come out. We got a couple questions in chat. We got one that says, do you think recruits are more concerned about food and facilities or wins? I'm going to give this one to you first, Sam. Go for it.
Their biggest concern is wins. But not all wins are created equal. Would you rather go to a 10-2 Boise State or an 8-4 Georgia team? I mean, Boise had more wins, but I mean, just because it's the prestige of Georgia and the facilities and the tradition of Georgia. Or you look at UCLA versus Fresno State, who, yeah, they beat UCLA. Or San Diego State has had some wins over UCLA, but does that mean they're getting recruits over UCLA? No, because you have to add them all. The biggest factor is wins. But then once you add in the food and the campus and the brand and the facilities, then that can kind of stack things up so it outweighs the more winning program on the other side. What do you think, Jack?
Right. I would say that food and facilities is, I'm not saying they're more concerned about it, but as a coach, you have to have those basic essentials. If you have better food, if you have better facilities, then you slowly start to get better and better recruits, which leads to more wins, which leads to higher recruits. So you've got to start somewhere. And the easiest thing to fix is food and facilities if your athletics department signs off on it. And Martin Jarman can't sign off on giving UCLA 8 wins a year. That's just not not how that works, but he can sign off on giving us over $5 million in food budget, or, a big donor can come in and help us build a big facility. That's a stepping stone on the way there. But if you're going to try to compete against the likes of an Oregon or a national powerhouse, it's the wins, and the highest recruits will all be drawn to wins.
And it's almost like a tiebreaker where, like you said, you control what you can, but if your team goes 8-8 and another team goes 8-8, what's going to be the deciding factor there? Facilities, culture, food, campus, coaching, all that. So it's important.
Yeah, we got another question here. At what point does Chip Kelly's job become in jeopardy? I'll take this one first. Not this season, unfortunately. It's just impossible with the deficit that UCLA has with his contract. There's absolutely no way they're going to fire him. I don't think he should stay after a 1-6 or an 0-7 season. I think he should be trying to get over 500 to secure his job. But realistically, with the budget UCLA has, with the money that they've stored up, with the COVID pandemic, with the shortened season, all those factors are an advantage for Chip Kelly getting one more year here. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, it's not going to happen this year. It really doesn't matter if he goes 7-0 or 0-7. He's sticking around. He's going to next year. Next year is going to be the deciding factor on whether or not he comes back for the 5th year, because just with all the way the buyout is structured, that 5th year is pretty much just a sunk cost. The buyout is just the salary. So once you get past year 4, which is 2021, then you decide, is he right for the program? So he'll make it through this year. He'll come in next year. Hopefully he gets a little momentum this year and he takes that into a winning season, year 4, and they decide to keep him around for year 5. And I guess we'll see, but it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen this offseason.
Right, and expect UCLA fans to probably be upset if he does go 1-6, 0-7. There's a couple of very favorable games on the schedule. I mean, Colorado, week 1, you're playing against. I mean, we'll get into this a lot more later, but you're playing against a new head coach, new quarterback. That's a game you have to win. Arizona at home is a game that you have to win. There are certain games that if Chip Kelly doesn't come out a winner here, he's going to be facing a very hostile fan base.
Yeah, and it's tough because you don't really know. It's basically, he has no personal stakes in this season. He could get blown out every single game, and just financially speaking, they won't really fire him. So it'll be interesting to see how he approaches that and how he carries his team when he has that kind of that setting heading into this season. But we'll take that and move on to starting to preview this Colorado game coming up on Saturday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be in Boulder, UCLA's first game in a while, the first UCLA game of any kind in a while. We're definitely looking forward to it. But we're going to talk about their passing game, and this goes along with a column that I wrote for Sports Pac-12, who Dash Sports TV has an agreement with. We write some columns. They go up on their site. They're linked on our site, dashsports.tv, so you can find them there as well. And Sports Pac-12 is on Twitter at Sports Pac-12. So the article that I wrote basically is just saying Colorado had a suspect pass defense last year, over 280 passing yards allowed per game, 10th in the Pac-12, and they're returning mostly the same guys, but a new coach who's defensive minded. He might be installing a new system. They have a new quarterback, a young quarterback, or at least inexperienced. He's a redshirt senior, but has never seen the field. So UCLA is a heavy favorite going up against a not so great secondary, and that is a perfect recipe for airing it out, giving DTR 40 attempts, seeing what he can do when the keys are in his hands, and it's all up to him. So Jack, do you think that's the way UCLA should go with this game?
I absolutely do not think this is the way that UCLA should go with this game. UCLA and Chip Kelly especially have always been the best when they use their speed and when they use the short passes to get through a defense. DTR, he should improve in his 3rd year, but he had a lot of interceptions last year, and he had a lot of fumbles when he was getting pressure in the pocket, and he either had to roll out and he fumbled it away, or he got sacked and gave up a fumble. I don't think having him hold on to the ball longer and trying to air it out is the best plan for him. We've seen that he is turnover prone. So why not use the advantage. He's a dual threat quarterback, put him on the ground a little bit more. You've got Demetric Felton there in the backfield. He was named the number 1 running back on the depth chart earlier today. Use his speed, use his ability to catch the ball too. As a former wide receiver, do little dink and dunk passes the whole way down. I don't see how airing it out, especially in Boulder, is gonna work out for this team. I'm curious, Sam, do you think DTR has just all of a sudden become less turnover prone and less suspect to giving up interceptions on big throws?
Well, first of all, I don't mean you throw it 40 yards down the field. I just want to see him with really just controlling the game. I want to see the game on his shoulders, because just seeing him work in the offseason, looking at the history of UCLA quarterbacks, Pac-12 quarterbacks, Chip Kelly quarterbacks, and how they progress going from year 2 to year 3, I have confidence that he will get that touchdown interception ratio improved. It should be over 2 this year. I think it'll be solid. But I really think that this is because for Colorado, first-year head coach Carl Durrell used to be at UCLA, and their quarterback is his first time starting a game since high school. This is going to be the easiest game on their schedule. That means this is your time to take some risks. You're not going to be able to go into the USC game or Arizona State game or Oregon game and say, you know what, we're just going to give DTR 40 pass attempts and see what happens. You're not going to have the comfort to do that when you go into those very important games, whether it's on the road or at home against great opponents. Colorado is the weakest opponent on the schedule, and you kind of have to take advantage of that. You're risking that DTR does throw interceptions, but you want to see that upside. You want to see the growth from the offseason, and you want to test out his ability to carry the team in a game where maybe it doesn't matter as much, as opposed to waiting until later in the season and putting all the weight on his shoulders then.
Right. On paper, Colorado is the weakest opponent that UCLA is supposed to face this season. But I don't think that's the reason to risk it. I think that's the reason to probably play it safe. UCLA has always leaned on their strengths. Last year, they leaned on Josh Kelly a lot. Before that, they leaned on Josh Rosen in a passing offense. They leaned on Brett Hundley in a passing offense. DTR is not the same kind of passer as those guys. He doesn't need to go out there and throw 40 up to 50 times a game. Use his strengths. Use the guys around him. Chip Kelly has never really had a passing offense in almost his entire time. He's always relied on the run. I don't see why you should change that game plan just because the opponent's weaker. Chip Kelly really needs a win this time. He has not won his season opening game since he's been here at UCLA. He hasn't won, I don't think he's won his first 4 games both times in both seasons, unless the Washington State game was week 4 last year.
That was week, that was the 4th game last year.
Yeah, well, he hasn't won against a non-conference opponent. He's gone 0-3 to start both of the last 2 years. I think a solid win. You don't need to go out there and blow Colorado out. You don't need to. You need to get a win. You need to come out of Boulder alive. You need to come out injury-free. You need to come back to the Rose Bowl and try to get a win against Utah next week. That's the game where they need to start taking risks against a team that lost a lot of starters on defense, against a team that has a new quarterback. Not this Colorado team where you're going on the road on a Saturday, first game. You don't want to make a lot of mistakes, and you want to start the season off with a win. And I don't think by taking risks, that's a good way.
This is the time to take a risk, though, because you have to see. You asked me, do I think that DTR can be a high volume passer who doesn't turn the ball over? I would like to think so. I bet Chip Kelly would like to think so. But the only way to find out is by putting him in a situation where he has to prove that in a game. And you don't want him proving that week 6 with a division title on the line against USC or against Arizona State or on the road at Oregon. You want him to show you who he is as early as possible, so you know what you have in your quarterback and your offense moving forward for the entire season. You know that if they try airing it out and it doesn't work and he's turnover prone again, well, then you know how you have to run your offense when you go and visit Oregon next week. And you know that you can't rely on him to go and get 400 passing yards. Or you see that he is able to do that against Colorado, and now you have a more multifaceted offense that's maybe more dynamic, and you you have that weapon in your bag now, and you have a lot more options moving forward. So that's what I think. I would like to think it succeeds, but even if it doesn't, you learn. And this is the time to do that, because if you are going against a superior opponent later in the season when these teams are more cohesive, then you can't really afford for these learning games. Colorado is the one team where you can risk it, learn a lesson, see that what you did was wrong, and still possibly come out with a win. So that's what I'm thinking Chip Kelly should do on Saturday.
Right. We got a comment here. Colorado's got a super underrated defensive line. Does that affect the amount of runs they use DTR with? I don't think he's really going to run with DTR this year. With Colson Yankoff moving to wide receiver, with no one really decided as the number 2 quarterback, I don't think they risk stuff like that. I think, especially with if Colorado's defensive line does come out and is successful against the UCLA offensive line, which a lot of it has been rebuilt recently, they won't risk putting DTR in any way. They will not risk an injury to him by trying to run him and do some trick plays like that.
Yeah, I disagree. I think coddling him is not the right approach here. It's more up to the linebackers if DTR can outrun them, because I trust that he's athletic enough and to beat the Colorado defensive front on the edge. Will he have the vision to get past a veteran front? That's definitely up for debate. But once again, if there's time to experiment, this is it. Because you're going against a first game head coach, first game quarterback, not a great secondary. This is the time where you can kind of see what he has, and I would like to think that they run him at least a decent amount this week, just to get his legs moving, really.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think you can risk that, especially not with DTR. You say, well, see what we've got this year. See if he's faster. See if he can throw the ball better. But we've seen in the past 2 years that he is injury prone. He's gone out with an injury each of the last 2 years, and he is turnover prone. Well, I don't think Chip Kelly should risk stuff like that, especially in a game that you have to win.
Well, I guess we'll see what happens, but we'll take that and move on to our predictions for this game on Saturday. Jack and I have been looking into this in depth, definitely anticipating it a lot. It's been a while, but Jack, I'll let you give your thoughts first. Final score, who wins, how you think the game will progress over the course of the game.
All right, I've got it UCLA 42, Colorado 35. I know Sam's going to say, how is Colorado going to score that much with a new quarterback, a new head coach? Yes, the quarterback hasn't played in a while. He is a safety-turned quarterback because Colorado really needs a quarterback. They lost Steven Montez, who was great for them. I still think this is going to be a high-scoring game because UCLA's defense is transitioning a little bit. On their depth chart today, they came out with a 3-4 base defense, but a lot of the attention this fall training camp has been on their transition to a 4-2-5 under Coach Brian Norwood. Now, he's just the defensive back coach, and he said it himself. Chip Kelly said it. They'll still run whatever the defensive coordinator wants, but they're going to have to go to the 4-2-5 a lot, especially if Colorado does get hot through the air. They had a historically bad passing defense last year, and that's not just fixed right away, especially in losing guys like Darnay Holmes from that defensive backs room. I see Colorado being able to score, especially through the air, even if they are a little shaky. But I don't see Colorado's defense stopping UCLA's offense. I don't think it should be through the air. I think they should rely on Demetric Felton, their whole host of running backs. They've got great wide receivers this year that could beat guys after the catch. And I see UCLA scoring pretty easily all the way down. The 42-35, I think, is going to be closer. The game will seem closer at the end than it actually was. I think UCLA goes up by 2-3 touchdowns and then kind of take their foot off the gas. What are you thinking, Sam?
Yeah, I think UCLA is going to score early and often. Maybe not as much as you are. I don't think they'll take their foot off the gas, but when they get into the second half and they have a lead, then they might try running a different type of offense. But the final score, I'm going to go UCLA 34, Colorado 17. Sam Neuer, Colorado quarterback, he's barely played a quarterback in Boulder these past couple of years. He played safety and special teams last year, which, I mean, it can happen. You got Colson Yankoff playing receiver for the Bruins this year. I get it. It happens, but his career passer rating is below 80 in not much time, but still it's not a great sign. Carl Jarrell's first game, I think the offense for Colorado is going to come out super flat. So even if UCLA is kind of experimenting and in a transition period, I don't think that's going to really hurt them too much. If you are picking one opponent on the schedule who you want to see in your first game, trying out this new defense and this new balance, it's Colorado. They don't have Laviska Shenault anymore, so it doesn't really that kind of negates the loss of Darnay Holmes. You lose those linebackers, that's tough, but Steven Montez isn't there to pick him apart over the middle anymore. And the way they run the defense, I mean, if you're running with two linebackers or three linebackers, maybe you do have enough guys out there. And we have talked about the loss of linebacker a lot. They lost probably 5 really good linebackers. You still have Teloa, and you got Carl Jones, depending on where he plays. You got Damian Sellers. You have backers. So I don't think the defense is as depleted as people are saying. I mean, the secondary is looking very similar outside of Darnay Holmes leaving. So picking on a young quarterback and really having the freedom to do whatever they want offense, I think UCLA is going to go up early. They're going to experiment. They might have some turnovers, might be hiccups, but I think they're going to be pretty comfortable in this from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, you say young quarterback. He is a senior, so he's been on this team. He's kind of inexperienced.
I'll say that.
especially, if you can get to him early, if UCLA's defense can get to him early and often, this may well turn out to be a blowout. But I think one thing that Chip Kelly said this morning at a press conference was really interesting. He was a safety, so he moves well. He knows defenses. He knows how to play on the defensive side of the ball, so he knows what defenses are looking for from not only him but his wide receivers. It's kind of a thing where you have to account for his natural athleticism. That's what Chip Kelly was talking about. This guy is athletic; he can move. If UCLA all of a sudden is getting burned by him on when he's rolling out and they just all of a sudden can't catch him, they might need to readjust their defense. They might need to readjust their thinking. And yes, while he is an unknown quantity and he's not been great so far, there's no telling if he could break out this week. There's no one knows whether he might be the next, Baker Mayfield coming out here just surprising every single person. The next Johnny Manziel, where just out of nowhere this guy comes out and lights UCLA up. I don't see it happening. I don't particularly think it will happen, but I wouldn't rule out the possibility. UCLA's defense is going to have to.
I think. Yeah, talking about the UCLA defense showing up, I think the defensive MVP of this game, my pick is going to be Bo Calvert. He's really the core of that linebacking group right now. I mean, he's only played 5 games. I know Teloa has been around and taken more snaps, but Bo Calvert is more rangy and athletic. And if Neuer tries to be mobile, it's really going to be on Calvert to call out these mid-play decisions. I mean, he had 1 game last year against Cal at the end after he served his suspension. He got 7 tackles, 1 for loss. I want to see him do that again. I want to see him rattle Neuer. I want to see him rattle him early. And I think that's the way that UCLA gets to him and shuts down this Colorado offense for the whole day.
Yeah, the biggest thing this weekend will be rust. You'll see guys that are rusty. Guys will look off. They will miss plays. Guys will not run the right routes because this is the first game experience they've had in almost an entire year. They should have been starting in September. They didn't have a spring camp. They didn't prepare a lot together during the summer. They had a few weeks in the fall. That's literally all they had. Don't expect this to be a clean game. It is going to be sloppy out there.
Agreed. But, who needs spring football? We have real games coming up this weekend. UCLA against Colorado. We're really looking forward to it. And Jack, you will be on with guys from Buffalo Dash to talk about that game on Friday, break it down on a UCLA versus Colorado perspective. So please tune in for that. If you're watching live now, if you're watching later, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to watching that while I'm trying to head out to Boulder. But until then, thank you so much for watching. Just want to shout out to Sports Pac-12 again for publishing our columns. They're sportspac12.com on Twitter, at sportspac12. And then you can follow Dash Sports at Dash Sports TV on Twitter. Our website's dashsports.tv. You can follow me at Sam Connon on Twitter, and you can follow Jack at Jack C. Perez. With all that out of the way, thank you so much for listening. And Jack, thanks for joining me yet again today.
Sam, it's great to be here. I'm excited to be on Buffalo Dash this week too.
Can't wait. It'll be fun. And football is back. Bruin football is back. Thanks for watching.